Hello. Hi, folks. Welcome back. My name's Jeremy Champa. Today we're going to look at a reading section from the 2017 April exam. And this passage is called Mindwise: How We Understand What Others Think, Believe, Feel, and Want. Okay, so again, I want you to have read this passage and to have tried the problems on your own first. Not to say that we couldn't get anything from just looking at this together, but I want to avoid the infotainment problem. To me, the infotainment problem is this idea that we can just sit back, relax, and watch something, and that will help us learn. That's not true. Just watching something passively isn't the same level of engagement as really working on this material on your own and then coming here to these videos, taking notes about what you see. And if you're working directly with me, you'll know that I'm going to ask you to be able to describe things you've learned on questions you've gotten wrong and also on some key questions that you may have gotten right. So do the work and come back to this video when you've completed questions 11 through 21. Considering that most of you have probably already done that, let's jump right in. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to give you a quick rundown of how to read a passage like this. So most of you already know, but it'll be a good review even if you do, that you shouldn't read every line of a passage, especially essays. Maybe the first passage can be difficult because the first passage is about a fictional narrative kind of situation, but this passage and most of the other ones will be essays, and so they're written with a sense of organization that is very clear and easy to access if we think about topic sentences and concluding sentences, as well as sentences that use words like but, however, things like that change direction. So if we just read those key spots, we should have enough. So we've already read the title, How We Understand What Others Think, Believe, Feel, and Want. And I'm just going to read the beginnings and ends of paragraphs. So, knowing your own reputation can be surprisingly difficult. Consider, for instance, a study that analyzed a set of published experiments, all sharing the same basic design. In these experiments, people working in a group would be asked to predict how the other members of the group would rate them on a series of different traits. I'm going to stop there. This is a big paragraph, so that's why I read a little bit more, and I wanted to know what exactly we were talking about. Some experiments about what people think of each other. I will jump in here on line 21 because we're close to the end and I just want to know what's going on here. I don't see words like but or however, so that seems like a good place to jump in. If people were clueless, then there would be no correspondence between the two. Doesn't matter that we don't know what they're talking about. Just keep going. Statistically speaking, you measure relationships like these with a correlation where perfect correspondence yields a correlation of 1 and no correspondence yields a correlation of 0. The closer the correlation is to 1, the stronger the relationship. Seems like a procedural kind of paragraph where we're talking about what the experiments looked like. Next paragraph. First, the good news. These experiments suggested that people are pretty good overall at guessing how a group of people would evaluate them on average. Go to the end of the paragraph. End of the paragraph starts with the word in. In other words, you probably have a decent sense of what others generally think of you on average. Now the bad news. These experiments also assessed how well people could predict the impression of any single individual within a given group. You may know, for instance, that your coworkers in general think you are rather smart. Let's just jump down. Others think you are sharp as a spoon. Do you know the difference? So we're talking about how different individuals think of you. Line 50, evidently no. The accuracy rate across... Okay, so we don't care about the accuracy rate right now. What we care about is the general theme of the passage. Going to the end of this paragraph. As one author of the study writes, people seem to have just a tiny glimmer of insight into how they are uniquely viewed by particular other people. So people are good at thinking at knowing what a group thinks of them and bad at knowing what individuals think about them. Next paragraph. But perhaps this is holding your mind reading abilities to too high a standard. It's hard, after all, to define traits like intelligence. Okay, so let's go to the end of the paragraph. You must have a better sense of who likes you and who hates you within a group. Yes? I'm afraid not. So I don't know what distinction this is. So I would say that even though I don't really know the distinction they're making between the who likes you and who doesn't. So it's not just who thinks you're smart, who thinks specific things about, but who just likes you. So that's the distinction they're making, and maybe that doesn't even matter yet. So last paragraph, I'm afraid not. These studies found that people are only slightly better than chance at guessing who in a group likes them and who does not. End of the passage. Granted, it's rare that you are completely clueless on how you are evaluated. Accuracy tends to be better than chance in these experiments, but not necessarily by very much. So what we're seeing is this idea that people don't know what other people think of them, especially in individual situations. That's enough. You don't have to know all the details to get started. So let's do that. And just to be clear, I'm looking at these questions for the first time in a little while. So as I go through them, I'm going to be working on them the same way that a student would, only maybe slower since I'm doing it out loud. But what I'm looking to do is I'm looking to accurately and efficiently assess the answer choices. I've seen this passage before, but it's been a while. So the first question. Oftentimes we skip the first question. Let's see if we should. Which choice best supports the claim in the first sentence of the passage? We can do that because it's super specific. Oftentimes the first couple questions are very vague, and I shouldn't say vague, they're general. They're about the entire passage. Comprehensive, if you will. So that's not the case here, so I can do this question, and I'll do it right now. So what's the first claim? What's the claim in the first sentence? Knowing your own reputation can be surprisingly difficult. So we need to find something that matches that. 2 to 4. These lines 2 to 4, while they're definitely related to that, it doesn't support the idea. It's just consider a study. It's like, well, what is it about this study? So I need more than that. 21 to 23. Now, look, if you know where to go in this passage, I would say the likelihood that it's going to be in 21 to 23 is low because we've skimmed the first passage. It seemed procedural in nature. We didn't talk about results. The results, especially knowing what people think of you, can be surprisingly difficult. Knowing that we're looking for something saying it's difficult to know what people think of you, we should go to somewhere after line 40. Right now, the bad news. Right, so I know the structure of this passage from my initial skim. So I'm leaning towards 54 to 58. It's the only one after those lines. 54 to 58. Although you might have a sense of how smart your coworkers think you are, you appear to have no clue about which coworkers in particular find you smart and which people do not. That's good. I'm good to go. So that's the right answer because it supports the claim that it's hard to figure out what's going on. And only those lines, nothing before the line on 41 where it said, now the bad news, nothing before that had to do with the fact that it's difficult to know what people think of you. Okay, so I'm going to move on here. The information about statistical measurement in lines 23 to 27 is presented in order to. The information about statistical measurement is presented in order to. So see this phrase, in order to? That framing of the question is important to me. It tells me that we're talking about function or purpose. And those lines, or those kind of questions, typically mean that you should go directly above or directly below lines 23 to 27. We're going to read lines 23 to 27, but let's look above and below as well. So that's a style of question. Remember, the framing of the question matters a lot. So 23 to 27. That's that procedural stuff that we were looking at the end of this paragraph, right? So I'll jump in a little bit above. I'm seeing that the sentence above, starting on line 18, is kind of the same sentence. If people knew exactly what others were thinking, then there would be a perfect correspondence. If people were clueless, then there would be no correspondence. So then we get this statistically speaking thing. So I think what we're talking about in these lines is we're just helping people understand, look at these lines above. If people knew exactly what others were thinking, there would be a perfect correspondence. If people were clueless, there would be no correspondence. So this discussion of zeros and ones, 1 being a perfect correspondence and 0 being no correspondence, is a way of helping people to understand how we're going to talk about some ideas that are a little bit more intuitive in the lines above. If people knew exactly what they're talking about, perfect. If they don't, if they're clueless, then no correspondence. So that's 1 and 0. So looking at the lines above, I'm pretty sure that what we're looking for is an answer like that. Correct a common misunderstanding about, no, I don't know if it's a misunderstanding. Forestall potential objections. No, I think provide context for the way in which results would be discussed. Yeah, right? Look at that nice broad answer. Provide context. Like, yes. We're talk about ones and zeros and 0.6 or whatever. Look at these other answer choices. I want to just pay attention to what bad answer choices do. So, for instance, I think B and C do something similar. Forestall potential objections. So, look, I mean, that's factually inaccurate, but it sounds nice and fancy, right? And C says, draw attention to a pattern evident in the conclusions of the experiment. So, again, these are things that sound very sciencey. They sound generally like what you would expect if you're not thinking carefully about the exact language, which is thinking, I'm talking about social science. How does this work? So those answer choices have that, as well as the language in A where it says quantify certain data from experiments. Notice how all those answers sound way fancier and more sciencey, whereas D sounds nice and broad and something that you could say in any realm other than the word experiment. Provide context for the way in which the results will be discussed. That's a very, sort of reasonable way of speaking and not an overly technical way of speaking. And oftentimes that's what right answers do. So I like D for that reason, and I like D because, as we said, the frame of the question, in order to, meant to read above and below. In this case, there was a new paragraph starting below, so I didn't bother with that. And right above, we saw some common sense language about whether people really know how people think about them or have no clue. And then we had it translated in 23 to 27 into the numbers 0 and 1. So hopefully that's helpful. Remember, when you're doing this work, if you're working with me one-on-one, or even if you're just coming to my online office hours, write down notes while you're working on this stuff. Don't just sit back and watch this video. Write down notes. The things that I just said that made sense to you, great. The things that I said that don't make sense to you, or if you feel like there's a hole in something I'm saying, by all means, bring it up. Let's talk about it, because that's the way we actually come to a deeper understanding of this exam, right? Okay, so number 13, based on the passage, evidence set. So we'll do this evidence set, question, evidence, answer, right? That's the order. Based on the passage, in which situation would an individual stand the greatest chance of accurately predicting how he or she is perceived? Okay, well, this is probably the paragraph where it says the good news, right? Chronologically, that would make sense because it's the next paragraph after what we just talked about in 23 to 27. So I would go to the line numbers that are in that paragraph, 28 to 33 and maybe 41 to 44. I don't know, but let's go 28 to 33. We're looking for stand the greatest chance of accurately predicting how he or she is perceived. 28 to 33. So yeah, that's going to be the only one I think in this range. People are pretty good overall at guessing how a group of others would evaluate them on average. And then a statistical discussion of that. So a group. So let's go to the answer choices. A talks about individuals, direct supervisor. The collective opinion in answer choice B looks good. C is probably not good because it's only 2 students. Even though it says the entire class, it says based on talking with 2 students. A biographer predicts the esteem in which he is held by the living subject of his book. That's another individual relationship. So the best answer is B, collective opinion. And the evidence should definitely be 28 to 33. So notice my initial skim. Now, this is the thing. People think of skimming the wrong way. Skimming doesn't mean scanning. It doesn't mean just running your eyes over the page. It means selecting out the important stuff to look at. And of course, I'm saying that the important stuff to look at is the organizational statements in the passage. Beginnings and ends of paragraphs. Transitions happen in those spots too. So that's everything that's really important. That helped me see where the good news would be, where the accurate predicting of how one is perceived, where that's even talked about. The paragraph about good news. chronologically, it made sense too. So I'm bringing all this information about the structure of the passage and the style of the question, which helped me look at evidence before answers. Also, the chronology thing, all those things are working together so that I actually don't have to look at those other lines. Like, I'm fairly certain. I guess I'll go look at them just to be absolutely sure in this situation. 41 to 44, 68 to 70, 41 to 44. No, 41 to 44 is directly saying the negative part. And then, was it 67, 68 to 70? What about predicting something simpler, such as how... No, look, those lines, even though it sounds maybe positive, you learn over time to hang around people who smile at you. Yes, I'm afraid not. Right? So the lines right after that on 73 say, I'm afraid not. So they shut down that idea. So we're good. Really, I was a little bit too cautious in that approach there because you want to spend time as wisely as possible. This is an evidence set. It should appear chronologically. I'm not going to use vocabulary. I've seen situations where a vocabulary question goes outside the line number chronology thing. But number 16 talks about lines 38 and 61. Guaranteed it's before 61 then. Right? So 14 is going to be before line 61 because that's the furthest we would have to go for a question further down. And this one's about 58 and 60. So most likely you could just move on after 28 to 33 looks good. All right, so number 13 asks about the word magnitude. What does it mean? Okay, so don't make up your mind before you go back, but strength, influence, severity, reality, line 35. To put that in perspective, this is roughly the same degree of correlation. Sounds pretty good to me. Strength of correlation. So not the reality of correlation, not the severity of correlation. Severity doesn't make sense here. The influence of influence, I think people think magnetics, so magnitude, influence. Either way, with vocabularies, what you want to do is you want to pick your own word. I picked my own word, and then I went down and saw which words kind of matched. I used the word degree. To put that in perspective, and look, sometimes I don't read enough here. If you need some more context, for sure, read further up and further down. But put your own word in, and then try out the answer choices, trying to cross off the ones that don't have anything to do with your own word. So I looked for degree, and then, influence, severity, reality didn't really have much to do with degree. The strength of correlation, the degree of correlation, the amount of correlation. Okay, next one, 16. We're asked about the effect of these words on the tone of the passage. I can tell you already what's going to happen here. Look, this is a science passage, and we're using these casual phrases like clueless and mind reading. Whenever they ask you about tone in a science passage and they talk about these kind of things, lean towards the answers that say the informal tone is kind of fun, or it makes it easier to read and easier for non-scientists to read, or something like that. That's what's going to go on. Now, that doesn't mean it should be like, I've seen ones where that language goes a bit too far and is wrong because it'll be like, it makes the passage seem maybe unprofessional. That's too far. So remember, with reading, you're working with a number of strategies all at once. So we know that vague, less strong, less extreme answers tend to be right. And I know what the tone is going to be here. So casual and gently humorous. A potentially specialized discussion is more approachable. Agreed. It's not mocking and disapproving. It's not deeply pessimistic. And it's not casting doubt on how useful this is. Right? So I just picked out parts of each of these answers that were wrong. It's not a disapproving tone that reinforces the criticisms of the researcher's conclusions. The author and the researcher seem to be in the same place here, so there's no criticism. And then it's definitely not deeply pessimistic. I mean, yeah, sure, it's a little bit pessimistic. I'll agree to that. Let's be charitable here. But those words are not about stressing that it's impossible to get to know each other. It's about making this a little bit lighter and easier to read, and less serious, maybe a little bit more fun. So casual and gently humorous. See how mild that is? All right, 17. The author quoted in lines 58 to 60 expresses which view of the study results? Let's see, is there evidence? No. Okay, 58 to 60. I'm going to read a little bit above. I'm starting on line 54 here. Although you might have some sense of how smart your coworkers think you are, you appear to have no clue about which coworkers in particular find you smart and which do not. As one author of the study writes, people seem to have just a tiny glimmer of insight into how they are uniquely viewed by particular other people. So, in my own words, the idea is that, you don't really know who thinks what about you. Okay, so this language is interesting. It's not promising. That's why A is out. It's not promising. It's actually fairly unpromising. B sounds very good until the very end. It's not about groups, it's about individuals. So I'm crossing B off because of the word groups. C, maybe. Okay, so yeah, C's probably right. Look at D. They confirm that one's predictions about other people's impressions are no better than random guesses. Okay. The word confirm is the thing I don't like about D, and this is an important note. Words that sound too conclusive are usually wrong because scientists don't actually say stuff like that. For the most part, some scientists do when they feel like they have to be ultra clear with people, but for the majority of the time, scientists are less committal than saying that everything's confirmed. And the other thing I would say about D is I think that language shows up earlier, like in the passage. Let's see. Yeah, random guessing, that's at the beginning of the paragraph. The accuracy rate across these experiments was barely better than random guessing. So compare that to the answer that says are no better than random guesses. Right? So they use exact language from the passage and then they change the language just enough, right? It also sounds fancy. Compare C to D. Confirm that one's predictions about other people's impressions. As opposed to C, which says reveal that one individual hardly knows what another individual thinks of him or her. Hardly works with this barely better than random guessing, but not no better, right? So D is too extreme and it uses exact language. Right, so we have answers that were wrong because of individual little tiny phrases within the answers that are technically wrong. It's not promising, so A is out, right? It's not groups, so B is out. And even though, despite random guesses is language from the passage, it didn't say it's no better than random guesses. It's hardly better or barely better or something. So that's why C is the best answer. Again, take notes, ask me about these questions to the degree to which that doesn't make sense. I want to keep moving though. So 18, the main reason that the author includes information about speed daters, job candidates, and teachers. Why do they use this information? That sounds like a purpose function to me. Purpose function kind of question to me, sorry. Tripping over my words. 78 to 85. Look a little bit above and a little bit below because it's a purpose or function question. So, right above, maybe, this is the topic sentence of the paragraph says, these studies found that people are only slightly better than chance at guessing who in a group likes them and who does not. Some of your coworkers like you and some don't, but I wouldn't count on you knowing the difference. The same barely better than guessing accuracy is also found in experiments investigating how well, and now we keep going. So all these groups are saying, look, it's not just in one situation. It's not just like your coworkers. It's in all these different groups this is true, right? So context tells me that, let's see, indicate certain settings where further studies. No, it's not saying we need further research. Distinguish among certain behaviors observed in 3 different scenarios. No. Caution against making assumptions about certain individuals' motives. Maybe. Offer examples of situations in which certain finding holds true. Totally. D. Look, what's the purpose of including these very specific ideas? They're examples of situations in which the finding holds true, which is that you don't know if people like you or not. especially individuals. Maybe in a group you do. You think, oh, this group pretty much likes me, but you don't know what individuals think. So offer examples. Perfect answer for a function question. What is the function of mentioning these specific things? Offering examples. Right? Okay, 19. According to the figure, the mean correlation that most nearly approaches complete agreement exists between individual self-perception and, okay, we're going into the figure. We want the mean correlation that most nearly approaches complete agreement. Individual self-perception, complete agreement, mean correlation. I'm holding on to those phrases. Mean correlation's the y-axis. Complete agreement is 1. Now I'm going to the title. Mean correlations of perceptions of individuals. Okay. So this is all the perceptions of individuals, so I don't have to find that on any specific part of the chart. The closest thing is the darker bar under A. So that's well-acquainted individuals' self-perception and those individuals' perceptions of how others perceive them, or predictions about how others perceive them. Okay, so let's decode that. What people think about themselves and what those same people think about how others see them. So that's confusing, but what that's saying is, what do I think? It's saying that we think that people that are well acquainted with us, I'm predicting that those people think about me the way I think about me. Right? The way I think about me, self-perception, the way others, the predictions about how others perceive them, what I would predict about how others see me. So, of course, we think that people that know us well, that are well acquainted, see us the way we see us. So, let's find an answer that matches that. Individual self-perception and not actually perceived, it's about predictions. Actual perceptions of the individuals, no, it's predictions. Individuals' predictions of how they are perceived by people with whom they are well acquainted. That's right. That's the right answer, right? So notice the language was complicated and I decoded it before I went down to the answers. And look, if that seems overwhelming, break it into small pieces like I did. I broke it into the 2 individual categories. My self-perception, I thought about what that meant. Predictions of how others perceive me, thought about what that meant. So keep moving here. Number 20, which statement best exemplifies the distinction made by correlation in C in the figure? Okay. Correlation C. Okay, the bottom of the chart here, I'll highlight it. I'm highlighting everything else. The C correlation. Individuals' predictions of how others perceive them, and the actual perception of those individuals by others. So, what do I think that other people, how do I think other people consider me or think about me versus how they actually do? So prediction versus actual about other people's perceptions. And it's pretty low. Doesn't matter if it's your new acquaintance or well acquainted. You actually don't think, hold on, your prediction and the actual perception of those. So what you think other people think about you does not correlate very strongly with what they actually think about you. So let's go down and find an answer that says that. Sally believes she is outgoing, but thinks that others will describe her as reserved. It's not about what Sally... It's about what... That's how Sally thinks of herself and how she predicts about others. We don't care about how she thinks about herself. We care about her prediction and then the truth about others. B looks pretty good because it's her prediction versus the actual. C is talking about the difference between well-acquainted and not that well-acquainted. That's not correlation. C has both categories at the same place. So it doesn't matter if you're well-acquainted or not. And that's the same problem with D. It's not about well-acquainted versus newly acquainted because, look, those bars are in the same place. The dark and the lighter bar show the 2 different categories, and they're about the same. So answer choice B is right here. Her expectations versus the actual situation, right? So it's really important to take an active role in decoding language that seems complicated. If you don't, then it's going to be really difficult. Okay, so one more question here in this passage. The information in the figure is most useful for addressing which question provoked by the passage. Okay. The information in the figure. Well, we've already looked at the figure, so let's just look at, we're going to go back, but let's just at least get an idea of what some of the answers are. What determined the traits the researchers tended to focus on? No, this doesn't really tell us about what traits. Why are individuals more likely to accurately predict? I don't think that, I think this is about individuals, not groups. We didn't see anything about, maybe we did see groups, but I'm going to hold off on that answer. To what degree are people able to predict how individual acquaintances perceive them? That looks pretty good. Is one person's understanding of trustworthiness really so different from another person's understanding of that trait? We don't have any discussion in this chart about the definition of trustworthiness. So unless it's about groups somewhere, which I'll go perceptions of individuals, I don't see anything about groups. So for that reason, I'm going with that answer. Where is it? What is it? C? To what degree are people able to predict how individual acquaintances perceive them? Yeah, new acquaintances, old acquaintances, totally. Predictions, that definitely rings true. So more than just feeling like that answer is absolutely perfect, notice that I've crossed answers off. So it's about learning the patterns of this test and then using those patterns to your advantage, right? So the framing of the question matters, of course. The style of the question matters, the styles and the answer choices. I hope you're noticing things about all of that. The way I read the passage, all that stuff. Hopefully that's helpful. There'll be more videos to follow about other reading passages on this 2017 test, but that's it for this one, and I hope to hear from you about the degree to which this has been helpful. So, thanks. Take care.